So basically, pulling all the important stakeholders, people together right in the beginning, maybe concentrate on the low-hanging fruit that you get effective changes right away. So if we go practical, we are now looking to start a collaboration with one city in Finland, and they want to measure physical activity of 4-year-olds, and we will measure them. We will have then feedback session for the teachers, for the parents, and then there will be some sort of intervention and then measurement again. We haven't planned it too far yet. What would be your advice in this kind of situation with the small children?
So I think where I would... Is it a school-based intervention or is it a city-based intervention?
It is 4 units like daycare centres. Yeah.
Okay. So I think, first of all, you need to understand... I'll draw on some of the Creating Active Schools work that we did. I would say you need to understand who the key stakeholders are within that setting. And then you need to pull them together, and you need to co-develop what that journey looks like. So within the Creating Active Schools, when we developed the framework, we used something called the UK Design Council Double Diamond approach. But then, it sounds really cheesy using the word supercharged it, but we switched stakeholder groups. So we had same stakeholders working together and then mixing the stakeholders into different groups. So we spent a lot of time prior to the design day thinking, who are the people who we need around the table. So our kind of 6 main stakeholder groups for that particular area were school teachers, head teachers, UK-based researchers, what are called our active partnership network, who are the community arm of our national sport provider, public health specialists, and I always leave one off, active schools coordinators. So we felt those were the kind of 6 key stakeholder groups who understood what a whole school approach to physical activity looks like. And we got them to identify, okay, so if we're talking about a whole daycare approach to physical activity, what are all the factors, or what are all the important things within that setting that will help influence physical activity? That was our first task with them. And what was interesting, I imagine many of the things, because I was walking around listening to the conversations, many of the things that came out were not new and novel. What we then did was we moved, so we took one teacher, one head teacher, one active schools coordinator, and made 6 mixed stakeholder groups. And actually, when those conversations joined up, it's been fascinating listening to the audio. New thinking started to emerge. And a great example was, in the same stakeholder groups, there's one particular conversation where the public health specialists were saying, within a school-based approach, we need it to be like this, because that's how the head teachers will want it. And then when you listen to the head teachers' conversation, they're saying completely the opposite. And it's not until you join those conversations up that you hear this kind of light bulb switch on of, wow, my perceptions was always that's the way you needed it to work within your system. And then we took them through this kind of design-based approach. And I think, I love being in the outdoors. And, why do I walk up the mountain? It's not to reach the pinnacle, it's to enjoy the journey. And actually, the journey of going through the co-production has been as important to us in terms of the framework that we produced to the actual framework itself. Because when we've delivered training within schools around what is the school as a system, how do you start to change your system, there was one particular workshop where we printed off big posters of the Creating Active Schools framework, and I would say this is how I would take your daycare approach. Understand what the daycare system is. Once you've got it in a picture, sit down. Get the stakeholders to sit down with the picture of the system, and get your post-it notes out and say, okay, what are you doing in each element of the system to integrate physical activity? And what was fascinating was you could see that as we were talking through the beginning of the session, you could see the head teachers going, oh, blooming researchers again, telling us how to do our job. And I actually saw the presentation and I said, look, I can see you're all switching off because you think I'm here to tell you what to do. And I said, I understand that. And I can categorically tell you I'm not here to tell you how to do your job. You're the expert. And I said, you see this framework that's in front of you? That was designed by head teachers like you. It wasn't designed by me. And again, the light bulb went on. Oh, yeah. Oh, I can see how that could work. Oh, yeah. Teachers definitely had a role. Yeah, that makes sense to me now. And I think the power of the journey and involving everybody in the journey gives face validity to what comes out at the end. But fundamentally, within the CAS framework, what was really exciting is we had a picture that co-produced and was for the first time, I would say, we've been able to clearly articulate a shared understanding of what a whole school approach to physical activity is. I could have gone to lots of different people and they could have told me what a whole school approach to physical activity was, but it's the shared understanding that's important. The hard work is then implementing that. So we've been working on this since I arrived at Bradford, primarily in August 2020, around developing an implementation model. And because we're focusing on creating organisational change, one of the key issues within schools is short-termism around physical activity. They're very good at picking up new initiatives. They'll implement them for 4 or 5 weeks when there's that real enthusiasm and a teacher has the capacity to go that little bit above and beyond and invest some extra time. But they generally tend to fall away quickly. And the reason for that is that quite often, and from a lot of the work we've done using the framework, what we've seen is organisations are great at providing opportunities, but actually they don't integrate physical activity within the heart of the system. So when you look at the school's policy statement, ask them what their mission and visions are. Is physical activity, for us, the language we would use is within the school implementation plan, because the implementation plan drives what the school's going to focus on for the next academic year. So in your daycare setting, it would be, is physical activity integrated within your strategic plan, both as an overarch document for the next 5 years, but what are you going to work on next year? And it's taking the schools on a journey. And in that journey, it's not expecting that I can walk in 3 weeks' time and see the perfect whole school approach to physical activity. It's, I've started to read now around organizational change, looking at business culture, and 5, 7, 10 years are the timelines that are being talked about for organization and cultural change for whatever their outcomes are. We should be giving schools that amount of time to create organizational change for health behavior, because you cannot change. And if you think a school is like a super tanker going through the sea, it cannot change direction within the click of a finger. It will take a long time with gradual shifts in what they do. And the reason gradual is important is because if you change things gradually, and this is coming from the behaviour literature, if you change things gradually, slowly making changes, drip feeding change after change, year after year, the culture will slowly start to shift. The challenge is keeping that supertanker to continually change their culture, because we can work with the school and at the school level, but a school is a what do we call it, a subsystem within a greater system. So we could be working with a school around introducing physical activity and health. Well, if the government comes out with a new educational policy, that could completely wipe the floor with all the great work we're doing around physical activity. Great example in the UK at this, when we were going through COVID, when children returned to schools, the advice that was coming down from the government departments that children should be sat in rows facing the front of the classroom, because the educational literature was telling them that's the best way for children to catch up. So overnight, one statement made with good intention completely shifts the system to prioritise educational outcome over health, because sitting children down at a desk facing the front, I mean, that's devastating impacts, not just on physical health, but think about social emotional health. All of a sudden, the kids have gone from working in tables of 4 and 6, cooperative learning, team-based tasks, discussion, to no, we want you now to work in isolation, face the blackboard or whiteboard at the front of the classroom. And this is all about educational outcomes. You know, and again, I say I'm very fortunate to work in Norway. And what's really interesting is some of the research we're doing in Norway around is around physically active learning, but it's looking at the culture within Norwegian schools and the new Norway education policy that is around the social and emotional development of children and young people as one of their key threads within their policy. I mean, wow, that is fantastic, because as a researcher who's interested in the health and well-being of children, and fundamentally it's about, and I keep going back to the holistic development, it's about building or helping to build balanced young individuals who can reach their potential in life. What a great message to be giving to the education system, the teachers, the head teachers, of we will empower you to deliver education that is not just about academic outcomes. It's about many of those, what we've always termed softer skills. But actually, you know, we know from the world of work, yes, academic outcomes are important, but actually what gets you through in life are the softer skills, your ability to communicate, to talk to other people, to work and collaborate. All those skills are so vital in the 21st century, and will become increasingly more so as we go through the next few decades.
Yeah, a lot of things there. We started from the daycare thing,
Yes,
that
yeah.
seeing daycare as a system and maybe visualizing it, getting stakeholders to see it, and planning how they can integrate physical activity to this system that they see, and they should have it in the heart of the system and in their implementation plan. But you also said that it would take 5 to 10 years of organizational change. Is there any ways to facilitate it faster, or how do you? It doesn't happen by itself. How is there anything you are working on to do it faster or do it better?
So the way we're actioning it within the UK is we've developed a profiling tool against the Creating Active Schools framework. So the profiling tool, or the CAS framework, is summed in 4 areas: policy, environment, stakeholders, and then what we call opportunities. So the profile, our piece of work we're doing at the moment is to understand if schools do the profiling tool, which is fundamentally a self-reflection on their current provision, does that create any instant change? And the answer is we don't know. From our very early pilot work, we've got some anecdotal evidence that would suggest even just profiling their current provision and understanding all the different parts of the jigsaw of a whole school approach has helped schools to change their behaviour in small ways. I would hesitate to say we can do it faster. And I think that the worry for me is by doing it faster, we risk putting things in place that aren't ingrained in the culture of the school. And therefore, when other initiatives come along, they will be lost. What we're developing to go along with the profiling tool, which some things happen by chance and accident, was we felt, well, okay, if we've got a profiling tool that helps schools understand whether they're really great at monitoring and evaluation or actually they need to do some work, we need to put some CPD behind this. And actually what we should do is develop some online CPD, short bite-sized 10-minute CPD modules that link to we've got 22 areas of the framework. So there'll be 22 CPD modules. And again, I think it's how do you develop a system that is, or I think is already scaled, and then test it it's already set for scalability, but test it on a smaller group of schools to look at efficacy and effectiveness. And I think that It'll be interesting to see how that works. That's going to launch in September 2022. We'll test that in the next academic year and see if those online modules, what will happen is if a school in those 22 areas, it will tell them or help them understand what their high priority needs are. So they might have 15 high priority needs. It will help and work with them to select 3 or 4, and then they'll do those CPD modules, and that will become what the school focuses on for the next academic year. So going back to the initial question, can we do it faster? I think the only way you could is to put a huge amount of resource into the school. But the resource needs to not be around the delivery of the physical activity. So it's not about going into the daycare centre with 4 external coaches and those coaches delivering all the activity to the children, because that's great while they're there. But when the money runs out and you pull the coaches away, you've not integrated it within the system itself. And that kind of probably links to the work we're doing in physically active learning. So how are we changing the behaviours of teachers around physically active learning? It's not by putting expert practitioners in schools. And yes, that does have its place. You know, if we're looking at school catch-up groups as an example, or what is a common term in the UK at the moment, levelling up. But actually, it's about changing teachers' behaviour around the use of physically active learning. So we've designed a teacher training curriculum, and then off the back of that teacher training curriculum, we're developing free e-learning modules. So we're changing the behaviour of the stakeholders who operate within the school so that they change their behaviour over time. But again, these things take time. You can't, if tomorrow I said, all right, I'm going to run a marathon, or I'm going to run an ultra marathon, I couldn't do that tomorrow. I would have to slowly train and build over time. It would probably take me, with my current level of fitness, probably a year to 2 years to get near a marathon. And so I think we need to give schools or organisations, we need to give them time, and we need to support them. And as a researcher, the challenge then is how do we persuade our research funders that's the amount of time a school needs or an organisation needs. Therefore, that's the amount of time you need to fund us for to enable us to do an evaluation to understand if it's effective or not. It's fascinating. And I think, this kind of there's research and there's implementation. If we think, the practice side of delivering physical activity, we really need to get into that sweet spot in the middle where the two come together. And that's where I enjoy working. It's not the pure research, it's not the pure practice and implementation. It's that bit in the middle where you have those kind of interesting conversations.
Yeah, so actually really fascinating discussion and so many levels that probably we cannot cover all of them. If listeners are interested on this, which resources you would direct them to learn more about these things?
Right. Well, I've talked about 3 projects today. So I'll start with the Creating Active Schools project. We've got a publication in the International Journal of Behavioural Nutrition and Physical Activity. So if you search for my name, which is Daly-Smith, and it's DALY-Smith, you can find that publication. And there's also the website, which is creatingactiveschools.org, where you can see some videos, an introduction to the profiling tool. In terms of physically active learning, so we've got a website. It's a Erasmus Plus funded program, EU funding, and it's called activateyourclass.eu. And you can find the teacher training curriculum, and you can also find the free to access e-learning modules, which will launch, should be today. But I've not had my email through yet from the design team in Denmark. So I'm presuming it'll be in the next couple of days. So that they're all free to access. We're not here to make money. We're here to change children's lives. So whatever we can and where we can, it's free to access or low cost. In terms of the Jump project, the best place to go to is the Join Us Move Play website. You're just going to Google it and type that. But then also Dr. Jen Hall, sorry, I was going blasphemy past there, has written publication on the whole systems evaluation process in BMC Public Health. So if you search our names in that journal, you'll find the process evaluation approach. We're currently writing the papers around the control trial and also the evidence-based development of the intervention. So they're still to come out. But the best thing to do is just get in touch. My Twitter handle is @brainasize. Don't ask. It's one of those things you think is a fantastic idea at the time, and you realise, a year down the line, it really was not that great. Or just email me. Look me up at the University of Bradford and send me an email.
Yeah. So anyone interested, you can find those resources. And if you're interested of this ripple effect mapping, I did the episode some time ago with James Noble, so you can check that one also. And we still have some time left, so I would like to talk about this physically active learning. Could you tell about this? I checked your website, and you had nice kind of examples of how to do it.
Yeah, so physically active learning is the integration of physical activity within the delivery of academic content. So what we know from a lot of segmented school day studies on physical activity, sedentary behaviour or sedentary time is that children are the most sedentary in academic lesson time, especially maths and English. So, and if you think about the amount of time they spend in academic lessons, what we were interested in is how can we change teacher behaviour to deliver academic content in a more active way? This work isn't new. It's been around 50 years in terms of research, with some really sort of very early studies around what we call the acute effects, or, we deliver one lesson in this way, what happens in terms of physical activity educational outcomes. So this work builds on, if you look at the work of John Bartholomew, Joe Donnelly in the States, there's Nick Riley out in Australia, Lane Murtagh in Ireland, and Ash Rutan in the UK, Gerkar Riesland in Norway. And that's just the research. Actually, when you move across into the practice field, very fortunate to work with Bryn Llewellyn and Tactivate. And I know the guy, Bryn works with Ian Holmes, who's our Creating Active Schools director. They've got a company called Move and Learn, and this isn't about plugging their company, but they are advanced practitioners who have lived and breathed this, head teachers, deputy heads. So they understand the school system, and they support schools in integrating physical activity. So in terms of the EU project, it's been the co-production of this teacher training curriculum, because one of the issues at the moment is you need to influence before you create the problem. And what I mean by that is teachers go through teacher training. If we train them in a specific way, which is to sit children down to learn, we then have to undo how they've been taught to integrate physically active learning. So the curriculum is there to influence teacher training courses, but also current teaching practice and qualified teachers. It was developed through two-phase process. So we did a meta-synthesis of all the qualitative research around teacher behaviours in PAL, so looking at barriers, facilitators, to understand what skills do a teacher need. So we use the TDF. What skills does a teacher need? Looking at how do we build motivation, etc. And then we did a second piece of work, which was to interview what we called PAL pioneers. So we picked 6 leading researchers from across the world, teacher educators, and teachers who used PAL in their teaching. So we had 18 interviews altogether. And what was really novel from the interviews, and we're just writing a publication at the moment, was actually the first time we had an understanding of what we call the learning journey. And if you want to see the learning journey, if you go into the Activate curriculum, which you can find on the website, you can actually get a sort of initial insight into what that looks like. And it talks about the importance of onboarding teachers. So it's not just selling the benefits of why physical active learning is important, but it's also looking at what do teachers value. So what is it that motivates them to get out of bed in the morning to do their job as a teacher? And we need to align physically active learning against those teachers' values to understand how PAL can contribute to that. And then it's about building their knowledge of what PAL is, making them realise they probably already do it in certain ways. Most teachers will take their kids out on a class and go for a walk around the playground, collect some items, bring them back in, write a story. That's physically active learning. We're trying to broaden our understanding of all the different types of physically active learning. And a great piece of work by Jesper von Salen and Klaus, whose second name evades me, from the Danish team, who've pulled together sort of the 5 types of PAL. And then it's the journey you need to take them on of how do we then build that behaviour. So starting simple, really easy to implement ideas, how to manage classroom behaviour, building in small steps towards advanced practice. So that's the curriculum. That was launched back in November last year. And like I said, the e-learning modules are about to be launched, well, hopefully today or in the next few days.
Yeah, so really interesting. And you mentioned quickly the 5 types of PALs, physically active learning. Could you tell a little bit about those?
I knew that question was coming. Right. I can't tell you them off the top of my head, which is really poor. But I can give you some examples. So simplistic PAL would be integrating physical movements within the delivery of, say, times tables. So that would be where you are doing a times table in a classroom and you attach a bodily movement to it. Star jumps to the 3 times table. Moving that on into looking at integrating physical activity a little bit more. So that might be using things like relay races, spelling relay races, times table relay races. So what we're looking at, using the activity to reinforce what has already been learned. I would say the purest form of PAL, so embodied learning, is using your body within the learning process. So the great example, and I steal this off Professor John Bartholomew, who has got the Texas ICANN project, recreating the solar system on the playground and the children operating as planets, and actually, a scalable model, and then looking at how the moon circulates around the Earth. That would be embodied learning. And then I would say another type is the example I gave earlier about exploring in the woods, so experiential learning, and what can you learn through that experience that then might contribute back into your academic practice. I think in terms of PAL, for me, where the field is at the moment, we're very much in the research field. We're very much using PAL as a way to reinforce what has previously been learned. I think what would be really interesting is looking at the role of PAL in teaching new concepts. And I think that's really novel. And that might appear in longer-term interventions, but it's not explicit in terms of the role of PAL to teach new ideas. I think that would be, so if anyone's looking for a research field, that'd be a really fascinating place to go.
Yeah. And you said that this is mainly to improve the teacher's training or change the teacher's training. Where are we in the implementation? Is it already taking place when teachers are trained? What countries are doing it? Where are we with this?
So the Scandinavian countries are well ahead, as you would expect. So if you look at countries like Norway, Finland, definitely ahead, based on the school systems and the fantastic, the Finnish Schools on the Move program has been going a long, long time. A lot of the work in Norway, led by GK and the group at Cefal, which is the Centre for Physically Active Learning. So they're the 2 places I would be looking for advice on. How do we continue, or how do we learn from places that have done it really well? But then, you could go stateside and look at, again, mentioned John Bartholomew's work in the Texas ICANN project. There's the work of Joe Donnelly and his team, and again, the name evades me. But I think as researchers as well, don't just live in the research world. Go and investigate education practice, providers of physical activity, or PAL who are training teachers, we can learn an awful lot. And sometimes, I think, as a researcher, we feel we need to develop a new intervention to test. Actually, there's loads of interventions out there that exist already, that we can integrate evidence-based practice to help improve them and then test to see if they are effective and how they're implemented. But yeah, I would say Scandinavia is the place I would be heading.
Yeah. So this has been really interesting discussion. We have discussed 1 hour, so we can start to wrap up. Is there anything you want to advertise or promote, whether it's a job position or upcoming event or anything?
Yes, actually, we have a fantastic conference which will be in the Netherlands in mid-April. I will circulate the details on Twitter, and it is a physically active learning congress. So even with the challenges of COVID, we're hoping to pull together researchers and practitioners and policymakers from across the European Union. We'll be meeting in the Netherlands near Amsterdam. It'll be a 2-day event where there'll be integrated research and practice presentations looking at what the latest insights into physically active learning are. The keynote will be delivered by Professor John Bartholomew. We'll obviously be talking about the Activate project further. But also we want to hear from other researchers what the work they're doing around physically active learning and other practitioners. And I always see these events are an opportunity to set the next agenda. So one of the pieces of work we would like to do and involve people in is using that conference to set the 5 to 10 year strategic plan for physically active learning across the European Union, which I know sounds quite grand, but if you don't dream big, you achieve small. So yeah, please do check out my Twitter and activate.eu Twitter account to find out about that event in April. And if you can, please do attend. We'd love to see you there. In terms of anything else, I think that's probably it for the moment.
Yeah, so sounds good. This has been really interesting discussions, and yeah, if you're doing anything, be in contact with Andy and look for their resources. Do you have any final remarks before we finish up?
I'd just like to say thank you for your time and the opportunity. I always love just talking about physical activity research and practice, and yeah, let's hope we can all change the lives of children, young people in the right way.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to finish. Thank you.
Thank you, Ollie.